Tony Ferguson's next fight is Tony Ferguson's last fight. That's really important that it gets worded that way. There was a topic that came out, and somebody asked, if Tony Ferguson loses to Paddy the Baddy, where does Tony go from there? And the response was a little bit light, but it was in the vein of the narrative that you already expected because you've already seen it, which is if Tony was to lose to Paddy, Tony is probably done. Now, that's very light language. That's very light that you're probably done. But it's important, if you're attempting to show politeness and or respect, that you word it as follows. Tony's next fight will be Tony's last fight. It's important. Because if you word it a different way, then it's a loser leave town. It has to be. If you come out and you say X, Y, and Z bad about Tony Ferguson, and you follow that up with, and if he loses to Paddy the Baddy, he's released and he's done, then it has to be a loser leave town. Because if he's bad as you're saying, so bad that he's going to get cut with the loss, if he can beat that guy's got to go. Right? You can't have both true at the same time. If you say this guy is terrible, he doesn't belong, this isn't going to work, and he goes out and beats somebody, then that guy has got to go. Or it can't be true for the other guy going into it. Can we all see where we're coming from? And you've had guys like this, right? You went to school with a guy that's a wimp. You know he's a wimp. The whole school knows he's a wimp. But did you want to fight him? I don't mean that you're a bully and you would like to go pick on somebody because he's wimpy. Would you want to fight him? And the answer is no. Because you know he's a wimp. Everyone knows that he's a wimp. You just don't know for sure if you're wimpier. Just because you see a wimp or a guy that's not doing well, don't kid yourself that you know that you can then go take him. You don't know that. And there's a lot of things that you don't want to find that out. And I don't love the notion, and I certainly wouldn't try to retire Tony. I'm not coming from that perspective. But at some point, every gun fires its last bullet. Right? At some point, that chamber just goes dry. And where that is for fighters is clear to us, the audience, 2 years before it becomes clear to that fighter. So, while I am not calling for the retirement, I also don't like the concept, if he loses to Paddy, he's then done. Well, you could insert anybody you want. It doesn't have to be Paddy. Walk anyone out there that you want. If he loses to them, he's done. If he beats them, do you feel that that is a good cause and case and justification for going on and doing more? I mean, why is it you're trying to get him to stop in the first place? Do you think he's slowed down? Do you think he's taking too much damage? Do you think his preparation isn't the same? Do you think his lungs aren't quite on point? Do you feel that his body is looking different and softer for whatever various reasons? I mean, I'm just asking, what is your reasoning? Because if you're right with that reasoning and he goes out and finds a way to win, do you feel he should come back in a meaningful position, which he's always in? I'm talking about Tony Ferguson here. Tony has not fought not on TV since damn near his days on The Ultimate Fighter. And now we're going back a decade, right? This is a big draw. On the card that Tony and Paddy are on, you got a title fight, you've got a title fight, you've got them. The card goes in that order. So the third from the top, and the only reason it's third from the top is you have to make, if you got a title fight, you got to make it above it, right? But in all fairness, I mean, this is the second fight you want to see the most. Somebody came to you, you only get to see 2 fights that night. You're going to want to see Leon and Colby, and you're going to want to see Paddy and Ferguson. I'm sharing for you. It's a very meaningful spot to be there after all these years, to be there including after losses, after all of these years. It's a lot. And there are guys in history who have fallen from main card to obscurity. That's true. But you got to search them out. Your career generally will look the same way coming in and going. You'll start to break in. You'll start to get some notoriety. You'll start to beat the right guys. You'll start to work up the card. Maybe you make it onto TV or a co-main or a main. Then as things start going, well, you're going to go from the main back to a co-main. Then you're going to be somewhere on television. Then you're going to be pulled to the undercard. Back out the door. your career generally will look the same, but it is pretty rare that you could take a very meaningful guy like Tony Ferguson. Things don't go well in a feature match. The only thing losing out to it are world title fights. Like, it's a meaningful thing. If he says, I want to do this, if he says, I want to keep on doing this, I'm just curious what it is you think you can see within that performance to then make your determination. If a guy comes out and he just looks great, is that your determination for, even though X amount of times before he did it, and I believe that he will in the future, right? The whole thing starts to get weird. It can't be if Tony loses, Tony gets cut. Otherwise, it has to be both ways. If you're openly saying, if Tony can't beat this guy, he can't be here, then if Tony does beat that guy, the guy can't be here. And there's nothing wrong with having your last fight. Nothing. If I lose, I'm done. If I win, I am done. They're very interesting storylines, particularly when they're accurate, particularly when perhaps it involves the passing of the torch. We have two guys coming up in November, in Stipe and Jon Jones, both saying this will be their last fight, win or lose. I don't believe them. I'm not telling you that this is so, but I am proving the point that this narrative does exist and it is out there in certain places. In this particular place, it'd be much more appropriate. Imagining that Jon Jones, with a victory, is going to be done. That's kind of weird, but okay. So then imagining Tony, who's coming off of 6 losses with one more fight, is going to be done, win or lose. I think I would understand that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm not cheering for Tony's retirement. You can leave the topic out completely. But if you're going to say that if Tony loses, he's done, then you got to understand, Paddy's got to go if Tony beats him. You cannot, if you're making a case that Tony's going to get released with Paddy, you cannot in your mind make a case where you don't stand up and strongly believe Paddy's got to go if he can't beat him. Or you can just be a more reasonable person, understand that Tony's next fight is going to be Tony's last fight.